Dude, because like things in those type of situations, like things are gonna take themselves to their conclusion. Like those sort of energies have a resolution to them. And if you're around people that have some assumption of what things are supposed to be for you, even outside of your own control, you're going to end up following along with whatever those energies, because they're perpetuating themselves. The group wants it. The group wants its own ideations and assumptions to be confirmed. That's the easiest thing on an individual level, and then on a group level too. It's like we have a propensity to try to fit the world to what we want it to be. And it's like people will be sacrificed to that. Like that will take you'll take that all the way. You'll take that all the way to the end. Like if people start to get an idea of what somebody is and what, or then they start to want that to be justified. Like we want that to be justified now because that means that we were right. We don't have to change our minds. We don't have to change our opinions. And like I said, that will be taken all the way. You could die in a ditch somewhere, and then they'd be like, yeah, well, he was going in a bad direction. We don't know what happened. Or like, but well, no, they won't say we won't know what happened. They'll say, well, we expected this. This was kind of the eventuality. It's like it wasn't the eventuality. This was the circumstance that arose because this was what was put in place by this circumstance. But it's like to be understood fully is you have to see that the perspective is that the group, and this is only for situations where it's like some toxic level of organization. When a structure is organized like this, it's not healthy. But it'll place all of its negative aspects of itself externally, because we don't want to. We put things again. We put things in boxes. We put things in corners. We try to hide them away. And if everyone has negative aspects of themselves, but if they don't want to acknowledge that, they don't want to take a look in the mirror and see what they are for themselves and see themselves for what they are. They're going to put it outside on someone else. And the group facilitates that in a much more, an individual can do the same, but the group, once the group gets a hold of that, it's like, man, it's powerful. It's powerful stuff because it absolves all sins. It absolves all sins. And then you're left in a situation where you can pretend like you don't have any sins because all of your negative components of what, because everybody's good and bad. Everyone has pieces of them that are not positive and that are not negative. Everybody has good and bad in them. But it's like when you refuse to acknowledge the negative aspects of yourself and instead you place them on someone else. You place the negative aspects of your own self onto someone else, or the negative aspects and attributes of a group onto someone else, which are natural. Remember, like the negative aspects of everybody has good and bad. So it's like, if you refuse to acknowledge the entirety of yourself, one of the ways that humans will try to avoid having to do that, because we don't want to look at ourselves in a negative light. It's harder to do. We want to pretend we're perfect. But again, that's part of the lie. It goes to what I was saying before, is that we are geared to lie because telling the truth has consequences. But again, it doesn't have consequences. It has inevitabilities, because when you're running towards something that is a part of yourself, you're not ever going to get away from it. And that's the thing about the aspects of ourselves which we try to escape from, is that it's impossible, because you cannot get away from yourself. You can't get away from something that is a part of you. Now you can try to ignore it, and that's what a lie is. That's what not adhering to the truth is we are attempting to get away from an aspect of ourself, but it's impossible. But one of the ways that groups will do that is they'll try to place the blame on some either external aspect, something that's outside of the defined self, whether it's an individual doing this or a group, or someone within the group. They'll place all the blame because people want to offload that shit, but it's a degeneration of proper orientation in the world, is when you start to do that, because you're putting yourself in a situation where now you're starting to not acknowledge some of the aspects of yourself which cannot be taken away. Like you can ignore stuff for so long, but one of the ways that this is facilitated is by choosing one person or one group of people to blame this shit on, and then externalizing all of the negative aspects of the society or the family group or a friend group or whatever social group or even a person. an individual. Like these dynamics scale up. And for humans, this is over history. We can go over the fucking list, right? We know these examples. We've seen it happen, and it's like, and this will be taken to its far ends. People will go to, once this process is started, as I was saying in the beginning, there's a momentum that wants to be resolved. The situation wants to find itself as far as possible, because you don't want to, once you've chosen this path, to switch from this path and to choose a different path. To choose a different path is to acknowledge that you were wrong. And someone who's not acknowledging aspects of themselves which are negative, but in an unavoidable part of yourself, if you're ignoring a piece of yourself, you're not gonna admit you were wrong. Like, you've already chosen this. You're in it. They're in it now, and it gets ridden to its farthest extent. We know what happens when that happens, and it's like, and everything's justified when things will start to fulfill themselves in those situations. Like, once you set these wheels in motion, like the group now has a responsibility almost to make it happen. Like, now that we've chosen that this is our perspective on this situation, we're going to do whatever we can to make sure that we're right. And so then the situations are going to start to get massaged. So some stuff, whatever was chosen, whatever aspect of the lie was chosen to be in the first place, which was chosen to be placed on someone, whatever scapegoating aspects of the situation were chosen to be placed on that person or entity or group of people. Now the group has an obligation to fulfill this. So they'll do whatever they can to make sure that they're right. And then that will be taken to its furthest extent. They will watch this person flounder and die, and every piece of it is righteous. Every piece of it is righteous to them, because they understand that what they have done is just how it is. Like, we were right the whole time, and they want that to happen. They're doing everything they can to make that happen. And that's what it is, man. So but it all starts with an inability to acknowledge. It starts with a lie. It all starts with a lie. It's an inability to acknowledge an aspect of the inevitable. And when you start to do stuff like that, you can see the evils that start to outpour. And it's like, we have a responsibility as a society and as a species to try to root out these behaviors. But it's like, you can't root out something without getting to the root. And the root of the problem is just the avoidance of the truth. When we get to a point where we're not telling lies at all, then this shit won't happen. But the natural progression of going down the roadway of this stuff ends in these bad, dark recesses of reality. And you know, the last 200 years have been perfect examples of the last I'm sure throughout human history that this has been happening. But as soon as we chose to tell that first lie, when we chose to walk into the world and not have a full acknowledgement of what the truths are, then you're leaving the door open for this type of behavior, because people will go to far lengths to run away from themselves, to not understand and to not acknowledge the pieces of themselves that they don't want to see, because it's painful. But it's like, the pain's coming no matter what you do, and the retribution on the other side of this behavior will come. Like, everybody gets theirs in turn. So it's like, whether or not it's in this lifetime or the next, I don't know. But it's like, the retribution is swift, and it's like, you can't avoid the truth, and the truth will find you no matter where you go, because you can't run away from it, because it is a piece of you. But it's like, people just need to be aware that that when other people start to find ways to avoid acknowledging aspects of themselves, they have to place it somewhere. It has to be placed somewhere else, because you can't just have it there and ignore it. You can only do that for so long. Like, what they're going to end up doing is they're going to offload it. That's way easier than just ignoring something. Takes effort. Convincing yourself that it never was a part of you, especially when a group gets together. Is that easier to do than just ignoring it? If you want, you can convince yourself that it was never a part of you, because now it's on those people. But it's like, you're placing it somewhere else. You're putting it on somewhere else, and you will go to great lengths. Once you've started that process, you will go to great lengths to perpetuate it and continue that. And it's so dangerous, man. Like, you got to be aware in this world that that's a possibility, and that people out there they're just they're acting scared, they're running scared. But there's a real detriment to being around that type of situation because, like I said, they will take it to its natural, in their head, it's the natural conclusion of these things. When people start, when whatever they want to happen starts to happen, they're like, "Yo, see, it's exactly what we thought." But the thing is, they're doing everything they can to make sure that happens. So if you're in a situation like that, get as far the fuck away from the people as possible and only be around people who tell the truth to themselves and acknowledge the aspects of life that are legitimate. Because if you're not around those people, if you're around people who are lying, inevitably it might not be this certain manifestation or version of what happens in these groups, but there will always be a de-evolution, a pouring forth of one of these sort of twisted machinations of the way that groups and people operate, because you cannot avoid yourself without going down a road. You can't lie without paying the price for it. So, and you don't get away with that shit. That's the thing too. The people never seem to learn is that you don't get away with it. You can do that. You can do that. You can try to ignore. You can try to avoid a piece of yourself, but man, just fucking deal with the pain. Acknowledge the pain of life and fucking take it on. Every piece of yourself that you are, every aspect of yourself, the good and the bad. Just take it. Take it for what it is. Acknowledge it. Take responsibility for what you are and everything that you fucking bring to the table, the good and the bad, because you can't run from it. And if you try to run from it, there's going to be consequences, and you could fuck up a lot of shit in the process. You might fuck up everything you love in the process. And a lot of people do this blindly. People do this blindly. They don't even know what the fuck's going on because they're born into a system that's 6 or 7 generations into a lie. When you're born into something that's 6 or 7 generations into a lie, like now you're at a point where you don't even know you don't even know which direction is up and which is fucking down. So I get it. I understand it. Like I understand people, but it's like people need to understand the consequences to their behavior. And it's like, and you also have to take responsibility in your own life. You have agency to make sure that none of this shit ever happens. As long as people are telling the truth, as long as people are adhering to what is real, none of this comes up. So, but that's the challenge, man. I think that's the challenge of our time, is to try to find a way to get back to honesty. We see our societies are falling apart, and it's because of lies, big lies and small lies, everyday lies, and ones that have been upheld for centuries or decades or whatever it is, depending on the case. It's like everyth's a house of cards, and it's built on the fact that we're not acknowledging aspects of ourselves, and we're starting to see that. We're seeing the cracks in the foundation. They're coming in, and everything's starting to fall apart because nothing lasts forever. And there's a piece of it that's like, yeah, it might be just inevitable. It might be just a way that the world works, and this stuff is just coming and going, and people and societies need to lie because they have to fall apart, and because nothing lasts forever, and it's not going to be sustained without some sort of destruction. And this is just a pathway to destruction. There's different ways of viewing it. There probably is an inevitability to the way that the world flows and goes. And it just might be a tool of evolution. That's another layer. That's another way of looking at it. Another perspective is like, this had to die. This had to fall apart. And how was it going to happen? Well, we did it. It happened that way. And a lot of people had to fucking suffer because of it, but they were always going to suffer. And there was always going to be some outpouring. But on the other side of that, they had to get to a different place. And now they're at this place. And like, this had to happen to get here. And this whole set of events was just a part of the cosmic plan moving along towards where we're going. But different perspectives, man. It's like you try to understand shit. You try to understand shit in this life, and it's like some of the deepest truths seem to have another layer below them. You can't ever. It's hard to get to the center of a truth. Because truth is like a nebulous periphery, because we're too imperfect as humans to see it. We can't see to the center of truth. What that is not something that you can really fully acknowledge with your perspective, because we are flawed. We live in this space, this sort of projection of reality, and we can't really fully grasp. We can't even understand where we are in space and time fully. So how could we fully acknowledge the truth? how could we fully understand it? We never could, because we're just looking at it at this angle. So we can see like a slice of that shit. And everyone, and every society, every culture, everybody's kind of looking at a different skew. But it's like, that's the problem there. And then people will argue that there is no truth, because they'll see that and they'll say there is no truth. Well, no, there is a truth. The fact is, we are not equipped to see it. We're so imperfect as human beings, whatever we are, that we can only see slices of, we can see aspects of reality. We can't see the full picture. And so we aren't privy to that full knowledge, but it doesn't mean it doesn't exist. And that's why people get so confused when trying to understand shit, is because there's always a different perspective to take on it. Right? But it's like, you got to understand, you got to take as many perspectives as possible and get as many slices and cross sections of this thing that you can, because it does exist. But it's up to you to piece everything together, and don't just take one look at it and be like, I got it. Don't take one look at it and say, I got it. And also don't take one look at it and say, well, we'll never figure it out, because you got to fucking keep going, man. You got to keep trying to get it down and whittle it down and figure it out and get to the bottom of it. That's what we're doing. That's what the experiment of the last 3 centuries has been, is we're trying to get as close as we can to it. Maybe we'll figure out we never can, and it's a hopeless endeavor. But it's like, what are you going to do then? We got to fucking try. We got to try to figure it out. Like, we have this impetus to discover what is real. We have this drive to discover what is real. And it seems like it's a never-ending process, but it's like, what else is there to do?